January 2026. A Russian oil tanker called the Bella One is being chased across the Atlantic by the US Coast Guard, Air Force surveillance planes, and a submarine-hunting P-8 Poseidon aircraft. Somewhere mid-ocean, the ship disappears from tracking systems. When it reappears, it has a new name, Marinera, a fresh paint job of the Russian tricolour, and a different flag. The vessel had been running what analysts call dark, transponder off, for 2 separate 99-day periods. Not 100 days, not 98, exactly 99. Why 99? Because automated compliance systems flag vessels at 100 days. Someone programmed this ship to hide just beneath the threshold of detection. And the Bella One isn't an anomaly. It's a symptom of something much larger. A shadow architecture, reshaping how the world moves goods without being seen. Here's what normal looked like 18 months ago. A container ship leaving Shanghai for Rotterdam takes the fastest route, through the Strait of Malacca, across the Indian Ocean, up through the Suez Canal, into the Mediterranean. 21 days. Roughly 8,500 nautical miles. Then Houthi rebels started attacking vessels in the Red Sea, and normal collapsed. Carriers rerouted around the Cape of Good Hope. The detour adds 3,500 to 4,000 nautical miles, 10 to 14 extra days at sea. And here's the number that matters. 1,300 additional tons of fuel per round trip, costing roughly $900,000. Imagine every delivery truck on Earth suddenly forced to drive from New York to Los Angeles by way of Alaska. That detour absorbed approximately 9% of global container capacity. Ships that should be loading cargo are stuck in transit. Freight rates spike. Equipment shortages cascade. And that's just the visible disruption. The invisible disruption is stranger. Analysts call it ton-mile demand, a measure of how much cargo travels how far. When the Red Sea closed, ton-mile demand jumped 5.1%, even though the actual volume of goods barely changed. The same cargo, traveling farther, created phantom demand. This is where we expected the story to end. A crisis, a workaround, a return to normal once the security situation improved. We were wrong. The first clue came from Port Klang. Malaysia's largest port processed 14.64 million TEUs in 2024. A TEU being a standard 20-foot container, the Lego brick of global trade. By January 2026, yard density exceeded 105%. Wait times stretched to 5 or 6 days. That's not supposed to happen during a shipping downturn. So we looked closer and found something curious. Port Klang sits in a free commercial zone where goods can undergo, quote, partial assembly and packaging that meet transformation requirements. Translation: a product can arrive labeled made in China. It can leave labeled made in Malaysia. The question, the legally fraught billion-dollar question, is whether enough actually changed inside that warehouse. This is a shadow route, not smuggling, not necessarily illegal, but designed to navigate around tariff barriers without being seen doing so. And Vietnam has become ground zero for this practice. In July 2025, Vietnamese authorities discovered $25.8 million in fraudulent certificates of origin from a single Ho Chi Minh City company. Documents claiming goods had been substantially transformed when they'd barely been touched. The false papers went to approximately 30 different enterprises. The US response, a 40% penalty tariff on any goods caught in transshipment violations, not just the fraudulent shipments, any shipments that look suspicious. Here's what makes this systemically destabilizing. McKinsey's modeling shows that to replace Chinese supply chains under current tariff regimes, an importer would need to source from an average of 7 countries per product category. For textiles, 19 countries. Picture a clothing company that used to place one order with one factory in Guangzhou. Now they need purchasing relationships in Bangladesh, Vietnam, Turkey, Portugal, Mexico, Ethiopia, Cambodia, and 13 other nations, each with different labor laws, quality standards, shipping schedules, and customs requirements. The compliance burden alone is staggering, but the incentive to cut corners is worse. And this is where the geometry gets truly strange, because while some companies are playing this shell game with paperwork, others have built an entirely different system, one that doesn't hide from surveillance, but outruns it. Maersk, the world's second largest shipping company, now operates what they call a digital twin ecosystem. Every vessel in their fleet exists twice, once as a physical ship carrying cargo, and once as a mathematical simulation running on cloud servers. The digital twin receives real-time data from thousands of IoT sensors, engine performance, hull stress, cargo temperature, fuel consumption, weather conditions. Machine learning models process this data continuously, predicting equipment failures 72 to 96 hours before they happen. But prediction is just the beginning. The system runs what engineers call ghost ship simulations, virtual voyages that test thousands of routing scenarios before a single booking is confirmed. If carbon prices in EU waters spike, the algorithm recalculates. If congestion builds at Rotterdam, it reroutes to Antwerp. If fuel costs drop at a Cape Town bunker station, it adjusts speed to arrive at the optimal refueling window. This isn't automation. It's agentic AI, software that reasons, plans, and executes without human intervention. And in 2026, multiple vessels across multiple carriers are beginning to negotiate with each other, coordinating dock slots and yard positions through machine-to-machine communication. Imagine every delivery truck in the country suddenly able to talk to every other truck, collectively deciding in milliseconds which gas stations to use, which highways to take, which loading docks to occupy. Maersk is reporting over 30% efficiency gains in terminal operations when these digital twins coordinate vessel arrivals. The companies that don't have this technology aren't just slower, they're playing a different game entirely. But here's what we almost missed. The same technology enabling legitimate optimization is also enabling unprecedented evasion. The first quarter of 2025 saw something unprecedented. More than 12,000 GPS spoofing incidents affecting over 3,000 vessels. In under 2 weeks, ships were broadcasting positions that placed them off Georgetown, Guyana, while satellite imagery showed empty ocean. 97% of impacted vessels registered false port calls, flooding compliance databases with phantom data. The shadow fleet had learned to lie to the digital twin. A case study: the tanker Skipper spent 12 months exhibiting what analysts call a compliance exploitation profile. Systematic AIS gaps during high-risk transfers. Draft readings inconsistent with visible cargo loads. Rendezvous with other vessels at coordinates where both ships had transponders disabled. The pattern was invisible to any single tracking system. AIS told one story. Satellite radar told another. Radio frequency emissions told a third. Only multi-sensor fusion, The same technology the US military uses for battlefield intelligence exposed the deception, and even then, only retrospectively. Windward, a maritime intelligence firm, now claims to flag over 99% of vessels that get sanctioned before their official designation, an average of 3 to 9 months in advance. Their system doesn't wait for regulators. It watches for behavioral signatures, the too convenient 99-day blackouts, the suspiciously timed route deviations, the patterns that emerge when you correlate AIS with satellite imagery with radio intercepts. This creates what one analyst called intelligence arbitrage. Some organizations know which vessels will be blacklisted quarters before the designation. Others, relying on official sanctions lists, only react after the ship has already reflagged, renamed, and transferred ownership. The Bella 1 became the Marinera mid-chase. And here's the systemic risk. The geometry of global trade isn't just fragmenting. It's spawning parallel architectures that may never reconverge. The India-Middle East-Europe Economic Corridor promises 40% transit time reductions by combining maritime and rail through UAE, Saudi Arabia, and Israel, deliberately bypassing both the Suez Canal and Chinese-influenced routes. Russia's northern sea route is becoming seasonally navigable, with predictions of ice-free Arctic summers by early 2026. A Russian-controlled alternative to both Suez and Panama. And the Shadow Fleet. The behavioral data suggests they're developing their own emergent routing logic, coordinating through encrypted channels, sharing optimal evasion corridors the way legitimate carriers share port congestion data. Imagine the highway system splitting into 3 different networks, each controlled by different countries. Some roads visible only to certain drivers. The maps themselves constantly being rewritten. The concept of a global supply chain may be obsolete within 5 years, replaced by a patchwork of competing systems, each with its own rules, its own surveillance, its own blind spots. We started with a ship that changed its name mid-ocean, calibrated its blackout periods to 99 days, and outran a multinational pursuit. What we found was larger. The secret geometry of global trade isn't a map you can see. It's a real-time simulation, recalculated billions of times per day, by digital twins optimizing efficiency, by shadow fleets optimizing evasion, by AI agents negotiating with each other at speeds no human can follow. The visible architecture, the ports, the canals, the published routes, is increasingly just the surface layer. Beneath it runs a second system, algorithmic, adversarial, and almost entirely invisible. McKinsey calls it the Great Trade Rearrangement. BCG calls it resilient fragmentation. We'd call it something simpler. The moment the map stopped describing the territory, one question we couldn't answer. As these parallel systems proliferate, as the shadow fleet learns to hide from the same AI that legitimate carriers use to optimize, who exactly is watching the watchers?